Otsukimi here. Observations with Otsu. Glad to have you. Another week, another week of hopefully exciting price action. It's been pretty boring. And I guess we should say, despite how bad the day is already, at least it's not boring, right? So we'll see how this goes. But that's why I do observations with Otsu, so we can figure out what the week might look like, right? So a lot of times you may be wondering how things are going to go during the week. This is exactly why I make these videos. It's a weekly perspective to kind of focus on what can happen. I have just one preliminary thing before we get started, and that's my Discord, Knowhere HQ. That is a free Discord that you can join where I post charts, I talk about discussions. I have chart request videos every Monday, which is today. So if you haven't joined, go ahead and get started with that and join today. I'll leave a link in the description. On top of that, I've got a lot of other things going on. I got Knowhere Market Updates, which is a video update on Wednesdays, about 10 to 15 minutes long, going over the market. I go over a lot of things and I do it all for free. On top of that, I'm now launching Knowhere Premium. That's coming up next week. That's where I'm going to have my trading portfolio management system, capital management. On top of that, I have every 48 hours, I do a chart update covering 5 different coins in 5 minutes. So those are called mini market updates. I got a lot of other things going on. I also share my long-term holding positions as well. So we got a lot of stuff going on there. That is a paid thing. And that's an extra service from the Knowhere HQ. So you got Knowhere and I got Knowhere Premium. So it's up to you to do which one you want. I got one for both types of people. So go ahead and join that if you're interested. If you haven't joined Discord, go ahead and join that pretty much right now or after this video. So that's the preliminary thing. Let's just go ahead and get started. All right, we're going to start on Bitcoin first. We're going to go to the weekly as usual. So had it honestly, we didn't have that bad of a week last week. We had a little bit of a down move, but the problem is in the grand context of everything else, it wasn't so it wasn't very good, right? Versus the rest of the market, we have been in a downtrend for pretty much 2 months now. And it's not even like a fun downtrend, it's like a really boring one. One thing I had mentioned in previous videos, I think probably the last two videos, is that 2023 isn't a good year for price action, despite the fact that we are performing very well. So if you take the price tool and you kind of, even if you take the highs of this range to the current price action, we're about 67, maybe 70% if you want to be generous. So that's not that bad. Overall, like 70% per year is a pretty good average. Now, are we going to stay above 70% by the end of this year? I don't know. That's not really what I'm here for. And if I knew that, I probably wouldn't even be, I'd probably be retired right now if I could predict these things, right? So, but overall, the price isn't that bad as far as its performance. Now, the price action is a little bit harder, and this is one reason why I talk about so much about high time frame stuff, and this is why my observations videos exist. So we could look at a high time frame perspective because sometimes those are easier. Sometimes it's literally just as easy as buying on a high time frame and just letting it ride out. And so my color band is one of these reasons, right? So one thing that I do on the weekly is I just simply buy when this is blue. It's very very simple, very easy, right? And this script, this indicator is available as a bot for my Arum Pro bots. Those are coming up at the end of this month. Those are coming up after I launch Knowhere Premium next week. And so that's something to look out for. But it was just as simple for me as buying here when this is based off the Arun, right? And so when the Arun tells me to buy, I buy on high time frames. And this isn't much different than like an EMA either. Like it is different in its structure, but the whole idea of this is like high time frames, right? So buying on high time frames profitably, and I need to dance a fine line on this, is probably the easiest thing that you can do to make money. Now, that doesn't mean that you're guaranteed. You're not guaranteed to make money. However, it's probably the easiest way to approach that profitability, right? The hardest part about that is having to be patient. The number one thing, actually, the two biggest things that people don't have for trading is a good risk management system and good patience, right? And so I actually made a tweet over the weekend, and it was meant to be just a throwaway tweet, but I'm actually going to make a video on it. And I posted, would would you take $200 from me per day if you could learn one thing about trading every day? So, like, would you do it? And let's say that's only for 5 days a week as well, or even more. That's you know $200 a day. Like, you're talking about $1,200 a week to learn 7 things about trading. So just keep that in mind. Let that brew. That was a tweet. That was one of my higher engaged tweets. I actually gained some followers because of that. And I'll get into the story behind that in a different video. But what I want to focus on this time, but what I want to focus on right now is that you just need to be patient through this. This is not good price action. You should not be trading this. You shouldn't. And I'll be the first one to admit that. Like, why should you trade? There is a culture within the CT, CX, whatever it is, that we should be trading all the time, that we should be scalping all the time, that we're freaking out because there's nothing going on for 2 days. Just calm down and just focus on the charts and see what we got going on here. So, for the weekly perspective, my key observation for Bitcoin is that we have a trend line showing up here. And so we are approaching that. In fact, we are below this technically. If we transfer this to the daily, we can kind of look at this like so. Actually, we can adjust this. I think I drew it wrong. We are approaching it like so. I think this is better to say. Um, yeah, that okay. It brings that into context. I was kind of curious. So on the weekly, it's already broken, but on the daily, it's upholding. And so that's something that I want you all to keep in mind. That's my key observation with this, is that we are approaching this trend line. Now, one thing that I shared in a previous video is that this slope is a little bit too high, in my opinion. This isn't necessarily pure TA. This is more half of my intuition and experience, is that a slope of this height tends to get broken. And that might be now, that might be later. So that's one thing that I am looking at. And if we go back to the weekly, we can kind of see this in a better context, right? I'm not really sure why this is here, so I'm gonna get rid of that. We have the RSI that we are still above, so as long as we're above the 50, I'm fine with that. And so you might ask yourself, like, well, can you at least tell me where to buy? And some ideas are like, I say these in many videos. RSI 50, great place. EMA 200, great place, right? ARN trend change, really good. Those are 3 good things that I use those even after 8 years of trading. Those simple things, I use them all the time when I'm trading high time frame. And and that's why I keep saying them. I don't say them because they're just easy to say and it's just a BS excuse to tell you about TA, right? I actually use those. And it's one of those things that people don't like to hear that, but they certainly like to hear you make money, but they want you to say it a better way. Like, we have this weird fascination, and especially primarily in CT, that we want things to be more complicated. If it's not complicated, it's a scam, right? Or something's going on. What's the catch, right? And that's the problem that a lot of people have with trading. Like, sometimes the best way to trade is the dumbest perceived way to trade. Now, sometimes the dumbest way is also the dumbest way. So you gotta look and decipher that for yourself. But a lot of times, and trust me, I've met with a lot of CT personalities over the years. I've talked to a lot of people. I've talked to programmers. I've talked to lots of people, influencers that don't know nothing. And everything in between. Like, I know a lot of smart influencers as well. But the problem is, generally speaking, I know a lot of people that make advanced algorithms or try to make things more complicated. I've seen people try to make $1,000 a month trading plans. Like, sign up for this, it's $1,000 a month, and I'll help you trade or whatever. If you make money, whatever. I'm not saying that's a different topic, right? I can't get into that. But the thing is, we want to make things more complicated, and a lot of times it's really just quite simple. So Anyway, that's kind of my rant for today, and that's my key observation as well. Is this trend line is exactly what I'm looking at. Ethereum as well. I'll get into that in a second. But one thing that I'm looking at still is just this right here. I keep saying it. 27,800 is the point where I'm looking at. We are approaching that point. I am satisfied enough to try to buy there, and we got a lot of stuff coming up. We got the trend line, and if the trend line breaks, that we're going to hit that. We got the 200 EMA as well coming up. That's where we bounced at before. We kind of bounced, we deviated, but we bounced back above it. We've also bounced that there. So I've got confidence that we will, where's it at here? That we will bounce somewhere in this region. And so yeah, I think it's really that simple. The Aaron is crossing bullish today, even on a down move, so that's very interesting to see. And so that could mean that this price action on the downside is starting to slow down. We also have kind of a wedge play showing up. It's not the best, but it is here. So we could see something play out exactly how this played out to a smaller extent. We could break down here, and here's the thing: when we break down below the trend line, people are really going to freak out, and that's probably the time to buy instead. So I'm still looking there. Everything points to me to 27,800. And so that's something I've had. Look at my previous videos. I've talked about that for at least 3 videos now. And that's a once a week, so it's been at least 3 weeks. That's where my area of interest is. This yellow box or beige, whatever, it would, I don't know what the color's called. So anyway, that's that. That's Bitcoin. All right, let's go to Ethereum. And Ethereum and XRP will be a little easier to explain. You can see we're already kind of dropping here a little more. Everything's going to plan. A small tidbit here too. Don't freak out about anything at all, really. And if you are, try to figure out why you're freaking out. Try to think irrationally, and see where, first of all, where you need to protect your capital. Um, Cut your losses immediately if you need to, and then figure out how to make sense of what's going on and find an opportunity. And worst case scenario, always protect your capital. Always, always, always. Because if you don't know what's going on, that's okay. It's appropriate. It is wise to take your money out when you don't know what's going on. You should only be trading when you know what's going on. So, small fun fact for you. Ethereum. Going here, Ethereum and XRP will be easier to explain. Basically, so we had a bigger down move, and so that was to be expected. We saw some acceleration. I talked about this at Knowhere HQ, that we were kind of going towards this trend line. And for me, and I mentioned this probably 3 times in Knowhere, that my big area of interest is this red trend line. And also we had the resistance at 2000, but we're kind of ways away from there, so it's not quite local context for us. And so for me, it's really just as simple as playing this range. It's just very, very, very simple. We're also hovering above the 50 RSI, so we're exactly where I want to be. And that's why I talk about the 50 RSI. We're right there. We're right at the trend line where we should bounce. We typically bounce on trend lines. Sometimes, we don't always. Trend lines are meant to be broken eventually, but we also do bounce. We also tend to bounce on the 50 if the strength is there. So that's where I'm looking at. I have 2 areas of confluence. I'm looking at that. Overall, the A-Rune is still bearish on its consolidation. It's got 38% left on its bearish flow, which means, we roughly got about 8 weeks left of potential price action that is not to its all-time high. So that's kind of what that means. And so we have about up to 8 weeks more of bearish trend, a sub-trend, I should say. The trend is still bullish, as you can see right here, but we're still going to have a small bearish sub-trend first. And that's, of course, if we don't reach a new low locally, which for AREN would be 1625. So that's kind of where I'm bringing that into context. Overall, I think Ethereum looks the best. I think we might get into that. I'm briefly going to go over to the Bitcoin dominance chart and kind of see. I'm updating myself on this. We are hovering there right on the line. That's kind of what I've been looking at. And so nothing much to say on the trend line. my goal is that we would stay above this line and that we would actually touch this one first, the higher one, and that would start at about 53% dominance. We're at 50%, so we got a little ways to go. But this doesn't look too bad to me. We reclaimed the 50 on that. I think that looks perfectly okay. So here on the daily, it kind of gives us a heightened context. I'm looking at this trend line yet again, as I mentioned, but we have a few different things. One, we have the A rune on a bullish wedge is starting to cross up. That's what I want to see. What that tells me is that the bullish price action could be coming sooner than later. It's not necessarily that bullish price action is here. We can obviously see that it's not. But what we can see is that the bearish price action isn't as convincing as it should be. And one of the reasons we can understand that contextually is we've had a slow bleed this whole time. When you have a slow bleed, it tells you that the demand structure is not as solid as it could be, but it also tells you that the supply structure is not exactly like as strong as it could be as well. So we're kind of fighting through that, right? So that's one thing that we need to bring into context. Another thing is that we have the 200 EMA here. It's again same confluence as Bitcoin. It's together, right? This is where I'm looking at for a bounce right here, roughly right around 1780. In fact, I'm going to put that in alert there because I don't think I've done it. So that's my area of interest. That also matches well with this consolidation structure. This is the first structure, so it's just under it, about 1760. It also matches with this liquidity structure, which would be like roughly right here at, I'd say at the most up at top here would be 1740. So it's going to have some problems going through from 1660 to 1740. So that's kind of where I'm looking at. So am I trading this right now? No. I'm waiting for the drop and I'm waiting for a reaction. And so if I see a good move at this reaction, then I'll jump in. If I don't, I'll let it pass. So it's kind of basically that's all that is with Ethereum. That's my main observations with Ethereum as well, as we got this confluence, and this is also in part with this. Like I don't necessarily like how the bear trend is so strong right now on the daily, but the bear trend is not that strong on the weekly. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So my key observation with that. So and that's also my long and short. Same as Bitcoin as well. It would be like a long here, maybe focus, somewhere right here, and then the stop loss would be variable somewhere between this range. I don't think I would put behind here. It's too high. But we also have. I'd honestly want to wait to see on the reaction of this. If we go up above first, then that would depend on where I place my stop. A short position would be easier. A breakdown of this would be obvious. But I don't think the R&R value is there. I would wait for a buy-in instead. This would be a great buy-in in my opinion. Actually, probably more so right here, starting at 1670. Another one would probably be like right here at 1460 to 1430. So those are what I'm looking at for Ethereum. Now let's go ahead and go to XRP, and we'll kind of round this out. All right, taking a look at XRP. This is a position that I posted in Knowhere. It's going very, very, very well. I have not updated in the Discord, so if you are watching it, I haven't updated that, but I do see, I will update it after the video, but I do see a divergence here, so I might go ahead and cancel that out. So we'll see how that goes. Um, I, I still like that position, but I'm still a big fan of it going down to 55 cents. And that's kind of what I've said before. We do also have this structure as well, right here roughly. And so we're still a ways away from that. So that's kind of where might start considering closing some of the positions on that. But we also have the divergence at play. So it might be worth considering closing that early. So we'll see how that goes. Let's go ahead and go to a different, I'm going to go to a different chart. Going to give me some idea of what I am looking at. So overall, let's see here, where am I at? So I mentioned a big thing here that we would go down to 55 cents. And it seems like we're pretty much going on part with that. On the weekly, so we had that big down move. And that's something I mentioned, right? This was the SEC news candle. I've mentioned it two times before that this would get faded. It is getting faded, so everything's working out typically as it should. When these things happen, they tend to fade at the top of the previous section, which is right here, which is at 53.5 cents. So that's why I mentioned 55 cents to kind of give you some cushion. So that's one reason I mentioned that. That would also give us a good bounce at the 50 RSI. ARUN is under a bearish consolidation, a very wide one. So that's another reason why we're getting this very larger drop down compared to other assets, is because it has more flex because it pumped higher as well. So that's basically it for Ethereum. So overall, to get rid of that, on the daily, you kind of see that structure playing out. The divergence is on the 4 hour, so that it could be something where it could pump tomorrow or maybe even towards the end of today and do that for the next day or two and then go back down. So that's possible. I've seen that as well. So overall, that's pretty much all I see that on XRP. I'm still confident that we'll get down to 55 cents. I think that is a fantastic long position. I think that's one of the easier ones I see in the market, and that's pretty much how it goes. I don't see any sort of reclaim. Like the previous range that we had, I think is invalid now. So there's no reason to really keep that box in context. So that's about it for XRP. I think it's very clear, and I like that. I think we need some clarity in the market, despite the fact that it's down a little bit higher than others. But honestly, a lot of coins are still only down less than 2%. Like this is not. Again, people freak out about this, and it really drives me nuts that people freak out very much so on coins that aren't really behaving out of the ordinary. And so that's another thing. You gotta understand all that in context. So overall, those are the positions I see on Bitcoin, Ethereum, and XRP. XRP, I think 55 cents is great. We're at 61 cents with that. For Ethereum, currently at 1816. I'm looking at about 1780 for a bounce. Bitcoin, we're currently at 28,800, and I'm looking at 27,800 for that. So and that's pretty much the too long didn't watch. So let me know what you think. Does that make sense? Do you like the analysis that I gave you? Do you have a counter presentation? I would love to hear it. Let me know in the comments. Like this, subscribe it, and thank you for watching. I hope you have a good day.